A problem that a lot of people going through Kundalini and awakening find themselves in is actually something that doesn't often occur to them to be a problem, and that is receiving too much Shakti and too much transmission from spiritual teachers into their system. One of the things we don't realize that transmission from a spiritual teacher, any spiritual teacher who can transmit energy, Shakti, consciousness, activation, certain kinds of teachings and programs that are transmissible, meaning their energy contains these particular kind of maps and Shakti and potentially the fire of Shakti, and can transmit into our system. That is transmission, and it can come through looking in a teacher's eyes, sitting in their presence, meditating on their picture, watching their videos on YouTube, doing practices with them on YouTube, going on retreats, reading books by them. Any particular way that you have exposure to a spiritual teacher, and if they're a transmitting teacher, that energy coming through the media form, whether it's a book, podcast, a video, being in their presence, etc. And there's a vast variety of ways in which you can receive that these days. That is coming into your physical and energetic systems, coming into your being. All of these exposures to different media and experiences of teachers allows us to have exposure and transmission and the receiving of energy, programming, instruction, and activation from those teachers into our systems, into our energy body, our aura, our mind, our subconscious and unconscious mind, our physical body, our chakras, etc. Everywhere and everything is receiving energy. And one of the other things we often overlook when we're receiving that transmission is it's also coming into our Kundalini. Kundalini is able to receive, be moved by, be activated, be pushed, be driven, be overwhelmed by transmission and by Shakti also, not just us ourselves. And one of the things I'll often see with people that come to me or email me, or I meet them in classes or events, is that they'll say, I'm completely overwhelmed, my Kundalini is really active, it's hot, it's surging, it's creating insomnia, I can't calm down. And when I ask them questions, because I'm always curious, I never assume that Kundalini is doing this randomly or there's no particular reason. Most of the time with Kundalini issues and challenges, there's always a reason. Whether that reason is this is just the time for you to have this particular purification experience, or the reason is something has or is disturbing Kundalini and creating and generating that surging. And too much Shakti ingestion is one of those reasons. What we don't actually consider is that when we're taking in all of this transmission from the massive spiritual smorgasbord that's available these days with YouTube and Spotify and podcasts and books and events, is that we're having a lot of dining on that spiritual smorgasbord, and then our body and our nervous system and our psyche and our Kundalini have to digest it all. And if you overeat or you consume more from that spiritual smorgasbord than what you can cope with, you can feel exhausted, flat, overactivated, heated up, emotional, distressed, collapsed is really common, that you feel like you just can't get out of bed. What happens is when all of that energy goes in, first of all, your system has to process it and digest it and make sense of it and respond to the instructions, if there are sort of instructions that come with the transmission. And you need to remember and always question, are those instructions right for me? Is this a time in which I actually need more instruction for my awakening? Or is my Kundalini going on actually quite well and it's actually good enough for me, and I'm just going to trust it and let it unfold in its own way? Sometimes what happens is when you get a lot of that Shakti in your system, it will push the Kundalini. It's like Kundalini is an energetic process. She's energy in movement and in flow. And when you get too much Shakti or transmission from external sources, you're putting energy in an energy process. So you're literally energizing the Kundalini energy, meaning you're activating her. You're driving her faster, you're pushing her quicker through your channels, you're pushing her up into a chakra that she hasn't prepared for yet, so you're getting symptoms there or jamming. Or you're in a way accelerating the Kundalini and then accelerating processing. Another thing that's very important to know is that the faster Kundalini goes and the more Kundalini you have in your system, the more processing you're going to have, because Kundalini is a processing energy and she'll process what she comes into contact with. And if you keep that flow nice and manageable and stable, then that is one of the ways, and one of the most important ways, that you can keep the balance between how much processing or trauma processing your system is doing and how much you can manage in your life without collapsing. So if you put more activation in your system and you start driving the Kundalini with sitting with teachers and absorbing massive amounts of Shakti and watching 50 YouTube videos in every spare minute of your day, you need to understand that it's quite likely you are putting a lot of energy into your Kundalini. And Kundalini has no choice but to respond to that, because she can't just throw that energy out. You're in charge, you're responsible, you're making choices, you're ingesting that energy and you're giving it to her and telling her to go for it. And so she will. She has no choice. What's she going to do? It's like she's a jet plane and you are pushing the accelerator forward on those engines. And as long as your hands and all the Shakti that you've absorbed is holding and pushing that huge turbo engine forward, she will go fast and fast and fast until that energy is digested and utilized to process and move things and purify you, and eventually it calms down. It doesn't always calm down. Some Shakti transmission can stay in your system for a long time, and I see sometimes really difficult Shakti transmissions that are misaligned for a person that have been in their system for years. And it's only after we clear that transmission, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the teacher, there's anything wrong with the transmission, it just wasn't right for them. Or they ingested too much, right? They ate from an all-you-can-eat buffet for a very long time until their body was completely exhausted. So when you clear that excess Shakti and excess transmission, the body and the Kundalini go, and they just sort of calm down and start to re-regulate and find their natural flow again. They're allowed to kind of come back into balance. So it's very important to take responsibility for what you ingest, how you ingest it, and how much you ingest from the massive, amazing, incredible, spiritual, endless lunch that is life on this planet at the moment, how great that is, and the internet and YouTube and podcasts, because at the end of the day, you are the one that needs to make aligned, conscious, intuitive and good decisions around what you're feeding your body energetically, what you're feeding your body and your Kundalini as transmission and Shakti, so that you can stay happier, well and in balance going through your awakening. I see people all the time that have ingested psychedelics and this teacher and that modality and that yoga and this Shakti activation, and their system is just overwhelmed. There is so many different things going on, so many different impressions happening on their Kundalini, and not only can they not cope, it's very hard for Kundalini to cope as well. Traditionally, historically, you'd have one teacher, one environment, probably a lot of time in nature. You would be limited in what you could digest, and it would usually be quite uniform. And so this kind of issue I'm seeing in people's systems is really a reflection of our modern technological times and the absolute explosion of spirituality and awakening on this planet. So don't be afraid to put yourself on a diet. If your Kundalini is sensitive and vulnerable, if you get really overwhelmed easily by external teachers and Shakti and books and transmission portals, then be careful. Honor that about yourself. Be respectful of your limits and don't push yourself beyond them. By respecting your limits, that's how you keep yourself safe. And if we keep ourselves safe on this journey, we're more likely to have a more steady, stable, and manageable householder awakening. Blessings to your awakening.